Imagine a scene from long ago. A mob of angry villagers, faces glowing in the light of torches, marching with pitchforks in hand. They're convinced someone in their town has done something terrible, driven by nothing more than rumors and fear, ready to deliver their own form of swift justice. Now, fast forward to today. The torches are tweets, the pitchforks are hashtags, and the village square is a Facebook page. Here, accusations spread instantly, and a single post can whip up an online mob, certain someone is guilty based purely on assumptions. Whether in the past or present, the pattern remains the same. People are quick to rush to judgment and act on suspicions instead of facts. It's a reminder that, while our tools have changed, oftentimes our reactions haven't, leading us to condemn without truly knowing the truth. Join me now as we examine the strange case of Natalie Bollinger, a 19-year-old who disappeared from her home in Colorado. You'll hear how an online mob discovered a trove of shocking circumstantial evidence that all pointed in one direction, and how detectives kept their heads cool behind the scenes, waiting to discover the truth of what happened to Natalie. Just outside Thornton, Colorado, a suburban enclave north of Denver, lies Riverdale Road, a seemingly ordinary stretch of pavement that conceals one of the region's most chilling legends. Locals call it the Gates of Hell. The legend begins with David Walpert, an early Colorado settler drawn west by the promise of gold and silver. Around 1864, he built a grand mansion for his wife and children as a testament to his success. But the mansion's history took a dark turn as David Walpert slowly descended into madness. It all came to head one fateful night when he set his stately home ablaze, with his family trapped inside, before taking his own life. The inferno consumed the entire house, leaving only the property's wrought iron gates left standing. To this day, those who travel Riverdale Road at night speak of seeing ghostly apparitions and inexplicable phenomena. People also claim of seeing David Walpert roaming the area, reliving his final tortured moments, while others say they've heard the haunting cries of his family. Of course, none of this is true. Well, not exactly. There was a mansion built by David Walpert, but he was outlived by both his wife and children. In fact, the mansion stood completely intact until 1975, when after years of neglect, it mysteriously burned down in the middle of the night. After the fire, the ruins along Riverdale Road became a source of many urban legends, which have captivated both thrill seekers and ghost hunters alike. Even the local Denver News has called the 11-mile stretch of Riverdale Road one of the most haunted in the United States. Well, on December 29th, 2017, two ghost hunters decided to take a morning cruise along Riverdale Road, drawn by its history of urban legends. After driving around for a while, they eventually decided to turn around and go home. Seeing a gravel turnoff near a farm called McIntosh Dairy, they pulled the car in and took one last look around for anything out of the ordinary. And that's when they saw it. In a wooded area next to the gravel road, there was a lifeless body on the ground that appeared to be a young woman, dressed head to toe in black clothing, leaves scattered over her head and hair. Immediately, the paranormal enthusiasts called local police to report what they discovered. As police from Adams County Sheriff's Office made their way to the scene, they were informed of a bolo issued just days before by the Broomfield Police Department, a neighboring jurisdiction about 20 minutes away. The alert asked police to be on the lookout for a missing 19-year-old named Natalie Bollinger. Having disappeared from her home less than 24 hours earlier, the Bolo described Natalie as 4 feet 11 inches tall, weighing approximately 102 pounds. She had maroon-colored hair, hazel eyes, and piercings on her lip and nose. An accompanying photo displayed a distinctive tattoo on her left forearm, a red and black yin-yang symbol surrounded by a turquoise flower. Arriving at the turnoff near McIntosh Dairy, the officers knew the secluded location, which was often used by teenagers looking to party. Upon inspecting the body, officers discovered that the deceased individual was indeed a young woman, shot by a single bullet through her temple. On her arm was a yin-yang flower tattoo, and although it would take several days to make an official identification, there was little doubt they'd discovered Natalie Bollinger. Initially, the investigators considered the possibility that the gunshot may have been self-inflicted. But after scouring the area, including beneath the victim's body, no firearm was ever found. This concluded that Natalie must have been shot by another person, and this was now officially a homicide investigation. Natalie's disappearance was brought to the attention of Broomfield police the previous afternoon by her live-in boyfriend, Joey Marino. That morning, he left their shared apartment around 6:30 to go to work, and throughout most of the day, he and Natalie kept in regular contact.
So you guys talked today or no?
Mm-hmm.
On your break?
I have a break at 9
a.m.?
9, and at 1:30, and we were texting. I could have swore we talked on the phone, but it must have just been a text.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in contact with her all day until the last text I got from her was someone's at the door.
Does Natalie have any mental health issues?
She's tried to commit suicide a number of times.
Joey hadn't heard anything more from Natalie after receiving the text saying, "Someone's at the door." When Joey came home from work just after 3 p.m., he found the apartment door unlocked, but there was no sign of Natalie inside. It wasn't until Joey found Natalie's phone sitting near their bed that he became truly concerned, because Natalie wasn't the type of person to leave her phone behind. She took it everywhere. But what concerned him the most was seeing the bottom dresser drawer pulled open, where he kept his Glock 9mm handgun, which was now missing. Knowing Natalie had a history of mental health struggles with depression, he feared the worst. Joey then called Natalie's mother, Rose, who lived in Virginia, to see if she'd heard from her daughter. Rose said she'd received a missed call from Natalie around 2 p.m., but when she tried calling back, the phone went to voicemail. Joey made another call to one of Natalie's friends, her ex-boyfriend Tim Beeson. According to Tim, he and Natalie had made loose plans to go for a motorcycle ride that afternoon. But after sending a few messages back and forth that morning, the last he'd heard from her was around 11:30. Not wanting to waste any more time, Joey decided to contact police and report Natalie missing. Initially, police found it odd that a 19-year-old adult was being reported missing so soon. After all, it was only a few hours tops that she hadn't been accounted for. But it was during the call, Joey revealed another reason why he decided to act so quickly. Natalie had a stalker.
So just a little bit ago, my girlfriend got a protection order against this man who's been stalking her for quite some time. And I came home missing, and all of the stuff here, I don't understand it. It's not like her. She's supposed to be waiting for me. Man that we have the protection order against is Sean Schwartz, and he's been threatening to come hunting for her and all this stuff.
42-year-old Sean Schwartz was mentally ill and living on the streets. He'd known Natalie for a number of years, and they'd been friends for a long time. But over the past 12 months, his behavior became increasingly bizarre and frightening to Natalie. Almost daily, Sean streamed live videos on his Facebook and YouTube pages, where he ranted and raved against a variety of topics. But mostly, they demonstrated a disturbing obsession with Natalie and her family.
So I'm at war with all of you. You are my enemies. You weren't gonna fight for my human rights, but you want me to fight for yours. You want me to stick up for yours, even when you're wrong. I didn't choose this. I didn't choose this for any of you. I'm not afraid of the cops. I'm not. I want them to come get me. I want them to fucking kill me. I want to be done with you people and your goddamn excuses. I don't deserve this fucking cruelty.
2 weeks before Natalie disappeared on December 28th, she had Sean served with a temporary restraining order, claiming Sean has continuously threatened to, quote, kill himself in front of me so I can feel the warmth of his blood splatter on my face. He has threatened to hunt me down and punish my father and ex-boyfriend. He has written slander about me on Facebook for over a year. He sends my family and friends messages, insulting and threatening me because I will not call him. On December 22nd, the protection order was made permanent. Text messages between Natalie and Tim Beeson during this period reveal the fear Natalie was experiencing. She wrote, "If I ever go missing, he did it. If I end up dead, someone tell the cops it was him. I'm not even joking." In another message she wrote, "I honestly feel that Sean would tie me up in a basement and no one would ever hear from me again." To feel safer in her own home, Natalie made sure the Glock pistol in the dresser drawer was fully loaded with a bullet in the chamber, just in case. But to understand the history and context between Sean and Natalie, we have to go back to the very beginning. Natalie and her twin sister Alicia were born on February 24th, 1998 in Westminster, Colorado, to parents Ted and Rose Bollinger. When the twins were still young, their parents separated, and Rose relocated to Rhode Island. However, throughout their childhood, Natalie and Alicia moved back and forth between their parents' homes a number of times. It was when the twins were around 13 years old and living with their father in Colorado that they started hanging out with an older, rougher crowd in some of the seedier parts of town. One of those individuals they met was Sean Schwartz, who'd been living on the streets for several years. Natalie and Sean connected over their shared talent as sketch artists. According to Natalie's mother, she'd been a talented artist who'd been drawing, quote, as soon as she could grasp a crayon. Sean's talent was evident by the photorealistic images he drew with a pencil and eraser. Although Natalie, Alicia, and Sean crossed paths occasionally while they lived with their dad during that time, the sisters would eventually move away again and wouldn't see Sean for another 4 or 5 years when they were 18. Sean describes his history with the Bollinger sisters on his YouTube channel.
I ran into Natalie and Alicia. They were walking down the street with some men that were obviously much older than them. And one of them, I don't remember which, because at the time I didn't know which was which. I didn't know their names even. And one of them ran over and gave me a hug. And they told me their names. And they told me, that they had missed me and how great and wonderful it was to see me. And they made me feel loved. And Natalie and Alicia both asked me to hit them up on Facebook. I figured it'd been a few years since I seen them. So I hit them both up on Facebook. And quite a few months later, both of them had sent messages back to me.
According to friends and family, Natalie was the type of person who had a heart for the less fortunate. But it wouldn't be until she came back into Sean's life that she was able to give him the one thing he wanted more than anything else in his life: someone willing to listen to him. Sean, who identifies as having both Asperger's and Tourette's, often confided in Natalie about his mental health challenges. But their friendship gained another level of trust one day when Sean reached a breaking point and called Natalie for help.
I decided I was going to kill myself in a Starbucks bathroom. I went and got myself a whole bunch of Vicodin, and I was going to take them. Well, that's when Natalie came in, walked into the Starbucks, came and talked to me, and I was on my way to the bathroom to take those pills, so I couldn't take the Vicodin. I flushed them down the toilet, and I tried to get on with my life. Natalie had hung out with me that day for probably about 2 or 3 hours.
From that moment on, Sean referred to Natalie as his rescuer, and she'd often give him rides when he needed them, and even tried helping him get steady work.
Natalie was trying to hook me up with a job. She was working for 3 different roofers, and she was also working with a company where they try to save the bees, and she was trying to get me a job there, and I totally would have dug that.
Messages exchanged between them during that time clearly demonstrated a genuine friendship between them. But it wasn't one-sided. Natalie also started sharing her struggles. According to Sean, Natalie sent him an email in the summer of 2016 detailing an extremely tumultuous upbringing, which included a description of why her parents broke up when she was just a toddler. The email begins, "So, my mom left when Alicia and I were 3. She was 19 and married to my father. He was cheating and beating her. My dad told her that he would kill her if she didn't leave, so she left us as well and moved to Rhode Island." The email goes on to describe how the twins' father had been in and out of jail for a variety of offenses. "We went back and forth between them for years," she wrote. "My mom would lose us for having dangerous men around. Then we'd go back to my dad until he started using drugs again." The email describes witnessing a number of traumatic events, including severe domestic violence. By the time she was 13 or 14, Natalie wrote, "He had us selling drugs for him. He was hitting us and doing drugs with us while being a little too friendly. So my sister told on him, and we were put into foster care." This would have been during the time frame when Sean first met Natalie at 13, living with her dad. While Sean has since posted screenshots of this email online, its authenticity has never been officially confirmed. But many of the details have been corroborated to match a known timeline of her father's stints in prison, as well as the various times she'd lived in different states. In the summer of 2016, Natalie decided to move back east to live in Virginia with her mother and sister. She messaged Sean telling him he was welcome to come and visit her in Virginia if he ever got the opportunity. Then, in September, Natalie was involved in a serious car accident. Sean believed it had been an attempt by Natalie to take her own life.
She ran her car into a telephone pole in Virginia that day. And after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to see her no matter what. She really needs a friend, and she needs somebody to listen. I'm going to keep my word, and I'm going to go. So I busted my ass to go. I kept in contact with Natalie the whole time I was on the road. We were friends. It was when I finally got to Virginia, I was like, all right, I'm gonna come over and see you. So Natalie texted me back, "Sean, you can't come to my house." And then she was explaining to me why, her mother's opinions, which I already knew. She had told me that, her mother had certain opinions and that, she wasn't going to be welcome of someone like me. And when she said I couldn't go over to her house, I understood.
According to Sean, both Natalie and Alicia attempted to help him get on his feet in Virginia. Alicia helped him find a place to park his car behind the business where she worked, which is where Sean lived while he was there. He also fondly remembers one day when Natalie and Alicia invited him to go to the beach with them.
And we took all of our stuff out of our pockets, we put it in my cowboy hat, and I laid down on my belly on the beach. Natalie was sitting, with her foot extended, and I reached up and grabbed her hand, and she squeezed my hand back. I was kind of scared at that point. I tried to pull it away, but she grabbed a hold of it and made sure that she had a good hold of it. And we talked for a few minutes while she was holding my hand, and Alicia came up behind her and wrapped her arms around Natalie. I've literally never felt that wonderful in my life. I didn't know that holding somebody's hand was... Anyway, when we left for Virginia Beach, there was one white flower off the side of that wooden bridge, and I picked it and I wanted to give it to Natalie, but I also didn't want Alicia thinking that she was unappreciated, so I gave it to Alicia as a thank you for bringing Natalie to see me.
Sean ended up spending several weeks living in Virginia. But one day, everything went completely wrong.
On my birthday, we went out to Elliot's Coffee Grounds. That was Natalie and Alicia's idea. And at Elliot's Coffee Grounds, we drew some pictures and we talked mostly about Alicia. Well, then her mom found her heroin. We were at Elliot's Coffee Grounds when her mom found that. And so her and her sister spent the last 20 minutes that we were hanging out texting. We got back to her house and dropped her off, and I was worried that was the last time I was ever going to get to see her. I just had this sick feeling, and so the day after my birthday, Alicia had asked how I was doing, and Natalie sent me one text that day too, and it was just one text, you know. After that, she didn't respond. I wasn't sure what I had done wrong.
Sean repeatedly tried contacting Natalie, calling and sending messages, but she stopped responding altogether. And here's where things start to get a little weird. According to Sean, he just started using a smartphone for the first time in his life, an old one of Natalie's with a cracked screen. Sean said the phone seemed to have a mind of its own, and he had little control over who it was calling or what it was sending. In fact, he claims many of the messages were sent accidentally, including some really mean and nasty comments.
I couldn't get the phone to work, and Alicia was taking all of the stuff that was being sent as if I had meant to send it. And when I was trying to explain that that's not what I was trying to send, that's not what it was sending. And like there was probably close to, between the two of them, there was probably close to 100 telephone calls. I mean, it was driving me bonkers. And I wasn't able to sleep. I was having a severe panic attack. I was afraid that Natalie and Alicia would never talk to me again. And I hadn't done anything wrong.
Eventually, Alicia confronted Sean about the messages.
Alicia said, "You showed your true colors," and a few other things like that over those texts. I was so frustrated, like there's nothing I can do to defend myself in texting. And now I have an even worse phone that's sending stuff on its own, and it's making everything 100 times worse.
A few days later, Sean decided to drive over to Natalie's house to speak with her in person. But instead of going inside, Sean sat in his car right in the middle of a major road in front of Natalie's home. He then pressed down on the horn and held it, blaring it for a very long time. According to Sean, his car had gotten stuck there, and he was simply honking his horn to warn passing motorists. Eventually, Natalie's mother came outside and called the cops, who took Sean to the hospital for a mental evaluation.
I sent Natalie and Alicia each a text. They were both identical. They said, I'm sorry about what happened. I understand if you guys are scared of me. If you are, give me a call and let me know, and I'll never get a hold of you again. So Natalie called me on Alicia's phone, tell me that her family was afraid of me and she didn't want me to talk to them again. I felt that was fair. I decided that leaving the state so that Natalie and Alicia and their family could feel safe was more important.
True to his word, Sean left Virginia for good and moved back to Colorado, where he remained without a fixed address. Over the next year, Sean's mental health continued spiraling downward, with him becoming suicidal and lashing out almost every day online, posting dozens of angry and aggressive videos, many of them targeted at Natalie and her family. On December 13th, 2017, more than a year after she'd stopped talking to him altogether, Natalie posted the following on her Facebook page. "Hey y'all, I have a public announcement. There is a man, Sean Schwartz. I met this man when I was young. I ran into him about 2 years ago. Long story short, I became friends with him. When I told him I didn't want to see him anymore, he sent me hundreds of texts and calls. He sent emails for over a year, close to every day, harassing me. making numerous accounts until I block him again, threatening my family, telling me he'll kill himself in front of me. Please ignore him. It only encourages him when he gets a response, much like a child. He's mentally ill, and I'm trying to fix this. Soon after making this post, Natalie filed for an official restraining order against Sean. 2 weeks later, she went missing. Police immediately considered Sean Schwartz as a primary suspect. Not only had there been a restraining order against him, Sean's social media posts showed he'd become irrationally obsessed with Natalie and her family.
Before we got started on dinner, I was in the kitchen. I got a phone call and put it on speakerphone. It was a phone call from the police saying that Natalie was missing.
Immediately after receiving the phone call, Sean posted this on Facebook.
Okay, the Broomfield Police Department just got a hold of me. Natalie Bollinger is missing. If you know her, I'm going to post up some pictures here. Please help find her, please. Please help.
About 12 hours later, Natalie was found murdered on the outskirts of town near a dairy farm.
Investigators now confirm a body found in Adams County is that of a teenager missing from Broomfield. Coroner confirms the body is that of 19-year-old Natalie Bollinger. Just how she died is still under investigation, but deputies want to talk to anyone who may have information on Bollinger's whereabouts after 1 p.m. on December 28th.
Although police knew they needed to bring in Sean for questioning as soon as possible, their investigation into Natalie's murder actually started much closer to home, with her boyfriend, Joey Marino. When Joey initially reported Natalie missing, he'd never told them that his Glock 9mm handgun was missing from his dresser. When investigators learned Natalie had been shot with a 9mm handgun, Joey came forward and admitted he'd withheld information, claiming he simply didn't want Natalie to get into any kind of legal trouble for having the gun, knowing she was under 21. Detectives believed Joey's explanation, but remained skeptical until surveillance footage from his work confirmed he hadn't left his job site that day. And very quickly, Joey was eliminated as a possible suspect. It was now time to bring Sean in. Sean explained to investigators he hadn't seen Natalie in person for more than a year, ever since he'd moved back to Colorado from Virginia. He also told them he'd been staying at a friend's house for the past several days and didn't go anywhere near Natalie's home. In fact, he claimed he didn't even know she'd moved back to Colorado until police called to tell him that she was missing in the first place. During his interview, Sean was fully cooperative, even handing over his phone and laptop and telling them everything he knew. Meanwhile, news of Natalie's murder spread like wildfire over social media. Literally overnight, her case became the biggest story among a number of web sleuth communities, with thousands of people talking about her case online, poring over her social media accounts, trying to solve the case. They also found Sean's accounts, his angry videos and posts, which now that Natalie had been murdered, seemed even more disturbing than before. The overwhelming consensus among web sleuths was that Sean must have murdered Natalie, but the detectives interviewing Sean came to a different conclusion, because they'd been able to verify that Sean had been staying with a friend in another town when Natalie went missing. In fact, detectives would later state that by the time they were done talking to Sean, they were 98% sure he was innocent. On January 5th, just a week into the investigation, police caught wind that Sean was posting comments and videos online, suggesting he might become violent to himself or others. After performing a welfare check on him, police took him to a mental health facility for evaluation. Initially, Sean was compliant, but inside the hospital, he became violent with one of the officers. After this incident, Sean was arrested on charges of assault and resisting arrest. When he was released from custody 5 days later, a Denver news crew was waiting to capture the moment.
I've been instructed not to speak to y'all, but I got a few more fingers for you.
Well, do you know what happened to her?
No. You know who does?
Tell me.
How would I know? What happened to Natalie? What do you guys know? All I know is from Facebook Messenger, and I hate Facebook.
What did Facebook Messenger say?
It doesn't matter. You need to get a hold of the police and talk to them.
Well, apparently you are of interest of this poor case, so why were you a suspected interest in this case?
I was not a suspect. I was a person of interest, and I heard that. I saw it on a news report. I have not yet heard that from the police. However, my rights have been violated for the last week, and you guys are seriously all up in my bubble and freaking me out. You're seriously giving me a panic attack. Well done, sir.
Many community members were flabbergasted police released Sean from custody. Along with thousands of web sleuths, they couldn't understand why police were taking so long to charge him with Natalie's murder. In their opinion, if everyone else could solve the case, why couldn't they? The simple explanation was that police were busy looking for actual evidence. Early on, police knew that Natalie's phone might provide valuable clues as to what she'd been doing the day she disappeared. More importantly, who she'd been talking to. But there was a major problem. The battery on Natalie's iPhone had run out, which meant a manual passcode was needed to unlock it. If the battery hadn't died, detectives figured they would have been able to unlock her phone by using a fingerprint during autopsy. Instead, police had to wait 30 days for the phone company to provide Natalie's phone records. And when they finally did, investigators immediately noticed something strange. On the day of Natalie's disappearance, December 28th, Natalie had been calling and texting with a number that hadn't been saved in her contact list on her phone. Even more mysteriously, she'd never been contacted by the number on any date before the 28th. Starting around 6:30 in the morning, about the same time Natalie's boyfriend would have left for work, Natalie and the person using the phone with the unknown number sent a total of 111 messages back and forth until just after noon. But because investigators were only looking at phone records, they weren't able to see the content of those messages. It didn't take long for police to trace down the unknown number to a 22-year-old male living in North Glen, Colorado, another Denver suburb approximately 15 minutes east of Broomfield. The 22-year-old was Joseph Michael Lopez. With their first promising lead in nearly a month, detectives began looking into Joseph without him knowing. Secretly surveilling him outside his home, they discovered Joseph appeared to be happily married with a newborn infant. They also learned he worked as a delivery driver for Domino's Pizza. And other than receiving a single seatbelt violation, his criminal record was squeaky clean. In the investigators' opinion, Joseph appeared very polite, meek, and even a bit nerdy. But although Joseph didn't strike them as the kind of person capable of murder, at the very least they knew he'd been in constant communication with Natalie on the day she disappeared. Investigators even went so far as to go undercover posing as corporate executives from Domino's Pizza, going to the shop where Joseph worked, and even having one-on-one meetings with all the Domino's employees. This was done for the sole purpose of surreptitiously obtaining Joseph's DNA, which they were able to collect from a discarded cigarette. But when they compared his DNA to the evidence collected from the crime scene, there wasn't a match. Maybe Joseph wasn't their man after all. Just when they thought they'd hit a dead end, Joseph's coworkers and manager told detectives something strange about his behavior around the same time Natalie was murdered. On the day she went missing, Joseph had come into work around 4 p.m. as scheduled, but then left early after getting sick. and throwing up in the bathroom. He then called in sick for the next 2 days, which, according to his manager, was very unusual for Joseph. On Thursday, February 8th, 2018, detectives approached Joseph at the Domino's parking lot and asked him to come into the police station for questioning. Joseph responded by asking a simple question, which took them completely by surprise. Is this about the girl from Craigslist? Although they had no idea what he was talking about, they soon would when they got down to the station, where he revealed something that would shock them to their core. Joseph was still wearing his Domino's uniform as he sat across from detectives inside the interrogation room. From the interrogation footage, Joseph appears calm and collected, considering what he's there for. According to Joseph, he'd been on Craigslist early on the morning of December 28th when he came across an unusual post.
What drew me to what he had posted was it was very weird.
You recall kind of what that said, got your attention?
Well, the title itself just said, I'm thinking about putting a hit on myself. So my first thought was, okay, someone obviously needs help and hasn't been getting the help that they need. Being the type of person that I am, I will do anything to help someone at least stay alive. My first thought was, I really want to help this girl.
Joseph responded to the post by sending an email. Then he claimed his intentions were simply to talk to the woman and help her out. He said eventually their conversations moved from emails to texting. And because Natalie had posted that she wanted to hire a hitman to murder her, Joseph claimed he decided to play the role of a hitman while messaging her, telling her about his rates and how he usually went about his business. He then revealed that role-playing was something he did in his spare time. He wrote stories, played video games, and had even gotten into trouble at high school for writing dark fantasy stories when he accidentally left his journal behind in English class one day. His teacher then read a number of horrifying passages Joseph had written about kidnapping and murder. Joseph told police that, like Natalie, he dealt with mental health struggles and thoughts of suicide in the past. He then claimed that after texting with Natalie throughout the morning, she'd given him her address and he went and picked her up. Joseph said after Natalie got into his vehicle, they spent the next few hours talking and driving around town. Still playing the role of a hitman, Joseph suggested a number of locations he offered to kill her, but that Natalie didn't approve of his ideas. He said that eventually, when Natalie realized he was actually trying to talk her out of it, she asked him to drop her off near her house. And that was the last time he'd seen her. By this point, detectives were incredibly dubious about Joseph's entire story. Not only were they not convinced the Craigslist post was even real, they'd managed to learn a few things about Joseph they were about to share with them. After taking a break from the interview, and Joseph was read his Miranda rights, detectives showed him his location data they'd extracted from his cell phone provider. Not only did it show that he'd been at Natalie's house, as he'd already admitted, it also showed that Joseph had been at the exact location where Natalie's body was discovered. But once confronted with the evidence, Joseph changed his story, this time admitting he'd driven Natalie out to the turnoff near Macintosh Dairy, where he claimed Natalie got out of the car and walked into the woods. He said she then knelt down and pulled the handgun out of her purse. But before he could stop her, Joseph now claimed she held the gun to her head and pulled the trigger. He said he then picked up her purse and gun and drove himself to work. This is when detectives confronted Joseph about another fact they'd already known before the beginning of the interrogation. Natalie's autopsy had revealed two very important details. First, a toxicology report indicated she had a potentially lethal amount of heroin in her bloodstream at the time of death. Secondly, the wound to Natalie's temple was not a contact wound, meaning The gun was at least more than a foot away from her head, making a self-inflicted wound impossible. Joseph then gave a third and final version of events, insisting that the Craigslist story was true and that he tried talking Natalie out of her plans. But when he couldn't change her mind, Natalie chose a location and got down on her knees to be executed. Joseph then said the two of them said a prayer together before he shot Natalie at her request. He then told detectives that Natalie's gun was in the trunk of his car. With Joseph now confessing to be the one who pulled the trigger, he was placed under arrest and charged with first-degree murder before he ever left the station. When police informed Joseph's wife and family, they were completely blindsided by what he'd done. Nothing in their experiences with him could have ever indicated he was capable of taking the life of another human being. By the time Joseph was arrested for Natalie's murder, the Adams County Sheriff's Department had endured weeks of relentless attacks and accusations of incompetence. So when they had the press conference regarding Joseph's arrest, they felt vindicated for not jumping to the same conclusions as some of the members of the public and press had chosen to do.
As you can imagine, a 19-year-old social media or phone, there's a lot of data there. And so looking through all of that data, conducting numerous interviews, we were able to develop and identify Joseph Lopez, date of birth 6/6/95. Just last night, we were in contact with Joseph Lopez. He came to the sheriff's office on his own accord and agreed to talk with our investigators. After that interview, Joseph was arrested for the murder of Natalie Bollinger, and he is now in the Adams County Sheriff's Office, and the formal charges will be coming forth. We booked him in for first-degree murder.
Joseph's claims about a Craigslist hit for hire were widely reported in the press, and many expressed their opinions that his story was completely preposterous. Over time, however, investigators were able to uncover the tragic truth. Natalie's Craigslist post was in fact real. In the Women Seeking Men section, she created a post titled, "Can you put a hit out on yourself?" with the text reading, "I need someone to do this for me. I'm not trying to be saved. Not a cry for help. I've made this decision. I don't need to be talked down. I just want someone to do it for me. I'm seriously asking. This isn't a game. I just need help doing it." The post was created at 6:25 a.m. Just 5 minutes later at 6:30, the post was flagged for violating the website's rules and taken down. But within this brief 5-minute window, Joseph Lopez had already seen it and responded to Natalie. What are the odds that Natalie's desperate message would be seen by the one person who'd been harboring fantasies of killing someone for years? But that's exactly what appeared to have happened. Instead of getting Natalie the help she needed, instead of taking her to the police or hospital, Joseph chose to drive Natalie to her death and pulled the trigger himself. In December 2018, Joseph pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced charge of second-degree murder. Despite the plea, Joseph received a sentence of 48 years in prison, the maximum for second-degree murder. Natalie's family spoke out against the plea agreement and claimed that prosecutors never consulted the family before offering a deal. Natalie's father, Ted, spoke to ABC reporters from prison, where he was being held for violating his parole.
There's no justice in this. And for Adams County to have enough evidence to convict him and then make him an offer is a spit in my family's face.
The DA, David Young, responded to the family's objections.
I can't say that I disagree with Mr. Bollinger and his thoughts. And I can't say that I wouldn't be doing the same thing if I was a father that lost their daughter that way. So I hope that someday he might appreciate that this is probably a good outcome under all the circumstances surrounding the case.
Even after Joseph's confession and arrest, Sean Schwartz claimed he continued to be the victim of brutal physical attacks, including being thrown off a bridge by the community members who blamed him for what happened to Natalie. To this day, Sean posts videos regularly, now numbering in the thousands, about what happened between him and Natalie and her family. During Joseph's sentencing, Natalie's mother, grandmother, and father gave statements to the court. Speaking on behalf of Natalie's twin sister Alicia, Natalie's mother expressed the heartbreaking reality of a twin whose sister was tragically taken from her.
Joseph Lopez has taken the light from her eyes, the smile from her face, leaving her alone in this world, battling through grief in her broken heart. Her soulmate, her best friend, and her other half was murdered by him.